The French and Indian War was part of a larger war, really what amounted to the First World War, called the Seven Years' War. The fighting in North America actually began 2 years before the official declarations of war in Europe, so it lasted officially 9 years, although for the last three, the issue was really settled in North America. Um, Before the war, you see that New France had a vast amount of territory compared to the British colonies, but of course the population was just the opposite. The English had a huge edge in population. Now, the single most important cause of the French and Indian War was a conflict over land. You can see here this area that was in dispute between Great Britain and France. Um, a lot of that resulted from the push of settlers, British settlers, westward. They especially were interested in this area right here, the Ohio River Valley. Here's the Ohio River along here. And they were looking for fertile land. The United States, or the colonies rather, that would become the United States, were an agricultural society. And they had large families. They had a great life expectancy. They had a high standard of living, certainly higher than people in Britain had. And they were looking to give their children the same kind of advantages that they had had. And that meant land. That meant farms that were large enough to support not only themselves, but the next generation and the next generation after that, with a population that was growing. So there was a westward pressure to move through the Appalachian Mountains into the Ohio River Valley. And that was the source of most of the conflict. There are some key milestones in the war. In 1754, fighting began in the Ohio River Valley in western Pennsylvania, where the Ohio River begins at the modern-day city of Pittsburgh. Um, this was an occasion for a young British commander by the name of George Washington to gain valuable experience, which he would use in years to come. Um, the fighting in the early part of the war went mostly for the French, however. Um, the British were able to turn the tide only later on. In 1756, Britain and France formally declared war on each other. The Seven Years' War was fought not only in North America, but also in Europe and in India. The key battle of the war was the Battle of Quebec, a battle fought at the Plains of Abraham, uh, on a cliff high above the St. Lawrence River at the city of Quebec. And the British under General Wolfe defeated the French under General Montcalm, although both of the generals ended up dying on that day of battle. In 1760, the French were able to defeat, the English were able to defeat the French at Montreal. And shortly after that, the English took control of the French fort at Detroit, and this was essentially the end of France's presence in North America. When I say France, I mean the French government, the French military. There were French people, of course, who remained, and of course, the eastern part of Canada along the St. Lawrence is a French-speaking area today, French Canada. And for a long time, Detroit had a very large number, at least as a percentage of its small population, of French-speaking citizens. So French language and culture didn't disappear, but French political authority and military power did leave. The official end of the war worldwide was reached at the Treaty of Paris in 1763, and this was an enormous success for Britain, and a failure for France and a humiliation for France. Now we can see the progress of uh, the war and this whole period in North America. And you can see the changes are very dramatic. Um, so in this first map in 1700, you can see the difference between the British colonies and New France. In 1763, when New France had been driven out, uh, the British took the land all the way up to the Mississippi River. Spain controlled most of the land west of the river. Um, the British, for the time being, gained Florida, although they would lose it later on. Uh, and the uh, the big winners, as I say, are of course the British. Now, in 1783, this was the second Treaty of Paris, which ended the American Revolution. And you can see in this pink area here, that's the new nation, the United States. Uh, France is gone still, and the British continue to control Canada. Spain is in the area west of the Mississippi River, and the area in the Pacific Northwest is in dispute. The British have claims, Russians have claims, um, and Spain has claims. And then in 1803, you can see that Americans have claims to this land too. Decades later, it was finally resolved when the northern boundary of the United States was extended westward along the 49th parallel, resulting in the Pacific Northwestern states that we know today. What you see here in 1803 is the result of the Louisiana Purchase. You can see this whole area here was sold by France to the United States. France had regained Louisiana briefly under the reign of Napoleon, regained it from Spain, but then very quickly sold it to the United States. And the Louisiana Purchase is a story for another day, but this gives us an overview. So this is the end of the 7 Years' War, the end of the American Revolution, and the Louisiana Purchase. Okay, now the effects of the 7 Years' War in North America are enormous. First of all, Britain's finances were severely damaged by the war. And as a result, they tried to impose new taxes and new restrictions on the colonies. The colonists' resentment of these taxes and regulations were one of the major causes of the American Revolution. Also, France was driven completely out of North America and craved revenge. They had been humiliated, they had suffered the loss of a very valuable colony, and they were anxious for a chance to get revenge on the British, and that came during the American Revolution when France allied with the United States and made the critical difference. Without their alliance, it's very doubtful whether the American Revolution would have turned out as it did. Another effect was that the colonies learned to cooperate with each other. They had to in time of war, and that lesson was valuable when it came time to fight their own war against the British. American military leaders like George Washington gained valuable experience, which they would put to use in the Revolution. And they also saw the weaknesses of the British Army. It had the image of being invincible, the most powerful army in the world, which it was, but their tactics were not often very effective. They, for example, would line up in rows, expecting a traditional battle on a battlefield, wearing bright red coats, and if you're fighting a war which is at times looks like a guerrilla war, then that is a very, very bad strategy. So the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War in the United States, in North America, had an absolutely enormous effect. I would go so far as to say that if the war had not been fought, it's hard to see how the American Revolution would have happened, at least when it happened and how it happened. So this is a major, major turning point.